I think it's really upsetting that everyone's oblivious to what is actually going on at the moment. Actually, in this government now, all of the issues we've got with the legislation and the law and the Magna Carta, loads of legislation found to be incoherent or incorrect, contradictive, illegally done. I mean, there's not just me. There's quite a lot of people, like particularly a lot of guests on the Robes channel. Everyone's got really serious cases now that need addressing on a lot of serious issues. But it just goes to show what the government themselves get up to. I mean, particularly the burning down of Parliament as well in the 1800s, when it was clearly Robert Peel and King William behind it. Peel even directed them to go set those things on fire at his orders. And the whole thing from the Luddites smashing the machines up because they petitioned for the wages raised and all the jobs were getting taken by machinery, and then skilled people were no longer skilled anymore. And in Parliament, they're talking in Hansard about crime going up ridiculously high, so Robert Peel invents the Met Police, full-time dedicated police force to tackle crime. It's just a case of making people work, and then lots of people getting put off work, but the elite still making loads of profit, and then them forming forces to tackle them, but not giving them better pay rises. Actually, the police created to fight the resistance against the complaints about the pay. And then you go into them taking the judicial powers out of the courts for juries, particularly in building and planning consent and civil matters. All the juries started getting taken out, so the people couldn't oppose this using their own judicial authority of their peers, which means that they couldn't stop or restrict their businesses from getting permission to build more and more. And then the women kicked off that they wanted the vote, and then they formed the Labour Party to try and get some coherent order to all the working class, to try and get them under sort of control and all kind of like aligned to the same belief system, so they wouldn't oppose. Claiming that they would act to get them better pay. When they got refused, they were doing perfectly. They didn't need the Labour Party. They were trying to get better pay themselves by petition, and they got rejected and refused. And ever since, nothing ever levelled itself out. That's just an example, right, of things that people have been finding out that are important. And a lot of the legislation, particularly when it comes to privileges and the peers and Magna Carta, which is the actual one that's in effect, the 1297 Magna Carta and confirmation of the charters, peer privileges, all this kind of thing. So Howard Crowhurst's video, try and get back onto this map now anyway. Just basically, there's a strong case for very long-term ongoing government corruption, particularly with Parliament burning down and all the records being lost from the Commons, particularly all the old petitions, and then they refused to start saving them from 1834 all the way through till 1947, 1948, that's when they took the peer privileges away, or claimed to, after the war, and then that's when they started saving the petitions again. They're really trying to... so no complaints or grievances from the war will survive or exist, or very few, because all of the people writing to Parliament during the war, they're all destroyed. So you won't really have complaints that people were what they were writing, complaining about by petition to Parliament. At least not the ones that got read out in the sessions, anyway. Now, this is the thing. On Howard Crowhurst's video, he really, really emphasises on his channel the very, very high mathematical skills and mathematical competence that the ancient prehistoric people have got in measuring and lining up the landscape. So they would be able to make very, very extremely accurate maps, extraordinarily accurate maps, without even needing to go to sea and sailing and using the stars, just through their surveying and measurements based on through and on the landmass. They wouldn't have needed any, like charting. They wouldn't need to chart it through sailing. They could even do longitude and latitude to a very high degree and competence and accuracy, and also altitude as well. The altitude. So I doubt that this would be the best of their capabilities. Now, the thing about this map is it's meant to be a Caesar map. And this is what this guy's claiming here, right? It's actually... The problem is with this map that Italy, the Italy part is actually quite accurate, in fact, very accurate. But the rest of it, they've got the border with France is making it look like the west coast of France was not coastal, when we know that the side of France is coastal. So that's completely wrong. And it's actually only got really a very small or short section allocated to France, which means to say that France was a lot smaller than it is. And actually quite a lot of what we're calling France now was actually classed as Spain or Spanish, which is why it would make sense for the Spaniards to if they join forces with the Italians to actually join forces with the Roman army, and how it was so easy for them to accomplish what they did. Because taking this into account, what was defined as France, according to this, was only a small area. So if you actually combine the Spanish and the Italians together, it's a lot smaller, easier area to conquer. And actually, therefore, if this map is correct or in any way right to actually what was defined as each country, I don't know what extent of the conquest it's going to be, right? But it would mean that if you ally with the Spanish, you've immediately got you've literally got most of this continent. And the part of Gaul, which was non-Spanish and not allied to take over, was only like a smaller area part in the middle, which is not like the whole landmass as which we normally think of when we think of France. And also this Germanica, which was apparently they're saying that the Italians didn't conquer Germanica, and they managed to keep them out, like in the Battle of the Forest, like it shows in the Gladiator movie. Was actually quite a strong force. It's amazing that they managed to actually do what they did and actually come into England and take over England. If not for the fact that, according to this, they're allied with Spain, which is half the job done. In fact, if they're allied with Spain, they wouldn't have even needed to take over Gaul. They could have actually not bothered. If the Germans had been stronger and took and extended further into that part that had been Gaul, then the Italians and Spanish could have well allied together and come onto England anyway. Now, another thing about this is if you're trying to convince people that it's worth taking Britain, you want to make it look like it's not going to be too difficult and that it's going to be easy, right? If you were to show this to all your army and troops, it would look like it would be an easy job, particularly if the Spaniards were your allies and that's where you position them and how you're drawing it and that you're already taking over there, right? So why didn't they just sail from the Spaniards and take over Ireland because it's actually not that close, is it? And this map is a lie. It's not fact. It's fiction, which is quite interesting. But and also they haven't even drawn the Isle of Man on there. And where's Jersey and Guernsey, right? You know, it don't work out. Now, if you drew a map and said, look how close England is to Gaul. You know, if we take Gaul, then we can take England a lot easier, right? But knowing that Ireland isn't really there, and that if you already got the Spaniards as allies, and why we just go hop over that way? Well, actually, it's not that easy to do that in reality. But if you convince them that, you know, the best way to do is do Gaul and England, right? Then they're much more convinced to try it and do it. So it's almost kind of like, I think it's a propaganda map. And, you know, you might think, well, this is just what they knew. Well, I don't believe that, because I think the Italian drawing part of it in Italy is quite well drawn. Maybe you might take into account for the Earth being round and not flat. But there's no way that, you know, the west coast of the continent, you know, Ireland is well beyond there, not within it, you know. And it's not actually that. In fact, they didn't actually conquer Ireland, and coins have only really been. There's only some Roman coins being found in and around sort of Dublin area. There haven't actually been that many Roman coins found further out than there anyway. So I don't know who they were lying to, but so I think that it's a propaganda map to make it look like it's a lot easier job than it is. And it's worth trying, rather than if they'd actually drawn it as it truly was. I think they were capable of, because they did. The thing is, all that knowledge and science from all the knowledge and science from the prehistoric Stonehenge building era, and I think Howard Crowe said that they referred to Stonehenge as a Temple of Apollo or equivalent of Temple of the Sun or whatever. Anyway. They were just extraordinarily accurate and brilliant at mapping a longitude and latitude and altitude over very long distances, and I don't think that they would get it wrong. So therefore, this is clearly not a map of what a scientist has drawn, but a politician. It's a political map. It's not an accurate, correct scientific map. It's a political map. Made to help motivate large armies into agreeing to do it, particularly if you're paying them off as well. And if the map's actually true, right? If there is truth to this map, that actually what we now consider France, well, a lot of it was Spain, which, you know, that might be a lie, but it might not be. It would mean that what actually really was Gaul was only an actual a very narrow band above the Alps, between the Alps and Boulogne, the coast, a narrow channel in the middle. What was actually regarded as not Spanish, which if you've got allies, like I said, if you've got allies with Spain and they've immediately got all up the coast and there anyway, you know. It's a miracle that they needed to take Gaul, but they didn't. They didn't actually do a very good job of Germany, did they, at all whatsoever? And in fact, I don't think that they'd come to England if they weren't allied with the Spanish, which is AKA. It seems like being allied with the Spanish is actually pretty much being allied with France. So if they were allied with the Spanish, and they actually, but Spanish happens to be, oh, by the way, we mean France. It's almost like. It's not far off saying. It's kind of almost like saying that, you know, Caesar and the French allied together and took over Belgium. You know, and it was a breeze. It was easy. It was a piece of cake. You know, taking Belgium was a piece of cake, like taking a Belgian chocolate out, and then that was it. It was all over. But you know, the Germans were hard, and they didn't have any of it. So it was really the fact that they allied with the Spanish, and I know that they walked on the south coast. They were trading with the Spanish along the coast anyway, the bottom coast, you know, where Marseille is. So it's almost kind of like through they allied with Spain, They've actually the Allied coalition is what won for them. It was a coalition with Spain which won. Then, if this map has got any truth to it at all, and taking over Gaul was literally a breeze. Although I know that we've got actual proper maps now, like we've got the actual real correct maps, and there's actually some records of Caesar going here, then Caesar going to this particular place, and that particular place, and then how he did it. Well, you could compare them and see which of that is true or not. But then again, if he's not drawing this correctly, and if this is a political map, then how can we go by any of his writings? When he tells us where he went to and what order he went to those places in, and where he won battles and where he lost battles, how do you know whether any of that's accurate or not, or true? Because he's a propagandist. And another thing, Rome was a populist democracy. It was actually, to say that it's X thousand years ago, they didn't have kings. They had elected rulers. It was all electoral. They had this amazing electoral system and a republic. And it was Caesar, actually, who was one of the wisecracks, who decided that he was going to be, take over as military leader and assume power. So he definitely is an intellectual, political propagandist with a military authoritarian force. And he actually ended up taking over all of the other rulers and kings using political strategy. And if you can take Rome using political strategy and convince an army to take over its own city and oust its democratically elected politicians, then you're on a winner. You really are a serious propagandist. Now you could convince all the army. The thing is, with the Spanish, why hadn't they already done the job themselves if it was that easy? I mean, it's amazing, according to this map, that the Spanish hadn't already taken Ireland themselves before they took England and wiped it out. Although the only thing is, we don't find that many Roman coins there. So that says that it wasn't, because it physically wasn't as... Maybe some Spanish people did go to Ireland trading, before the war or whatever, but it wasn't anywhere near as close to be able to easily invade it properly and take over or not, because it's not in that position. So that means that Spain were not in a position to invade Ireland like it looks like they are here. But if the entire thing, therefore, if the idea behind the invasion is that the whole thing is going to be, very, very easy to take over, right? Then you can convince them to do the whole job. All right, we'll take over the whole lot, right? If the whole lot looks easy, but in reality, the island part is not as easy to do because this map's fake, right? And I don't know what's going on. I don't know why is Jormon, and also what Howard actually said some really interesting the other day in the video, which he said that Caesar claimed, or he said that the ships of Gaul were absolutely amazing and brilliant, and some of them apparently he claims, we don't know how much he's lying or not, but I wouldn't have thought a propagandist would make out that their enemy is better than them, but he said that they had very, very well-made ships and really good ships, apparently the Gauls. Now, if that's true, well, we actually know that in real life they kind of went off from Brittany, which is actually it's near where Jersey and Guernsey is. So, but Howard Crowes was saying they went to Anglesey because they can then communicate between. They can strategize a defence between Ireland and England from the base in Anglesey very easily. So that would be like that wouldn't be like have been like the the ancient or well-established Druid headquarters or Druid base or spiritual headquarters of the Druid order. That would be like a new place to base a resistance from against Caesar, in the terms of, okay, these Romans are invading and everyone who's opposed to it is going to set up a new resistance base at Anglesey because it's easy to sail between Ireland and England, right? But the thing is, if they're allied with Spain, then it's understandable that they've got a very formidable force, and you're not going to easily beat them. And also, drawing this map like this actually makes it look like they're a lot more mightier than they are as well. It looks like they're very mighty because they've almost got us surrounded. They've almost got us in their grip, in their grip. And with that alliance together, once you take Gaul, then it's kind of like how can they lose? When actually it was a lot more difficult than actually they really thought, particularly with Ireland not being anywhere near that position it is, right? So, but it's understandable though that if Spain were allied with Italy, and then you can see why it was a real cinch to take over whatever was labelled or regarded as Gaul. Because it was a smaller area, more like I'm thinking of it now like, if this is true, and if actually already before they invaded, and the people that they allied with the Spanish was all up the side there, then, it literally is more like something like, as easy as taking over Belgium or something, as opposed to having to fight the whole thing. I don't know about the dates and the places, but, because this map is not just right, how can the writing be correct? He must have warped and changed a lot of the writing, so which parts of it are right and which parts aren't? That's the question, isn't it? But if they did have really brilliant boats and ships and they were trading with England anyway, going backwards and forwards, and they were really good at sailing in the Atlantic and in the ocean, and they were really good at, they could sail to Maiden Castle or, wherever they wanted, and they were very, very good at sailing with ships. The thing is, it is more of a formidable ocean than in the Mediterranean because it's warmer down there and it's all encapsulated anyway, so it's more of a tranquil sea generally. So if our boats needed to be tougher and better, another thing, it makes it look like the channel is not that hard to cross and is a lot closer anyway, particularly that ridiculous peak bit there, which looks to make it really, 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 really close to where Maiden Castle is actually, rather than a lot easier to go to Dover. And I think that's the Rhine. Is that meant to be the river there? Yeah, what they sail on. So actually sailing around in the channel there's quite a lot of water in the channel, and it's quite, if you had really brilliant ships and sailing the channel was quite easy in those ships and they were a lot better, then this map's actually making the channel look a little bit like it's not as impressive to sailing around in the channel. And actually being in Ireland, and if you did have brilliant and amazing ships and you were knocking around between Anglesey and England and also up and around all around the top of Ireland and Scotland, you really did have mastery of the sea and the ocean, and I think this map makes it kind of look like less impressive to have mastery of that area, and what it does though is it makes it look like the Romans definitely had mastery of all the land, but only because they immediately got the Spanish as allies, which basically, what if they didn't have that Spanish allies, they wouldn't have won. And this kind of like sailing from it's really blurring the edge. It actually doesn't have a true Brittany place, because the position of Brittany is exceptionally strategic to the land and top corner, but also to actually when apparently they had to leave, the Druid resistance left and came up to Anglesey. So Howard said, and on here, instead of having it protruding upwards as like a strategic kind of platform to launch from to go to Ireland or Anglesey, it's actually got that part recessed back down. It's actually got it there's a recess in, and it's got it like Ireland well within there rather than well outside of there. So I get the impression that this is a political map that could or may have been used to convince the Allies, the Spanish, and their own people that it was a lot easier of a task than it was, and also make them try harder, particularly when you pay them. But also, it does suggest that the area that they had to conquer on the mainland before they'd got full control was a lot less a smaller area that they needed to take in order to gain control. Once they got as soon as they got the Allies, which is about half the job, but in fact probably more than half of the job. But it also just goes to show how resistant the Germans must have been, unless there was some kind of deal going on where, they wanted to help them take them out. But apparently they really were fighting them, if we can believe any of the battles and records. Well, apparently they were really were fighting them, and they weren't having any of it. Why bother to go to the trouble and take over the island here, unless maybe they were just holding off, or there was some kind of agreement where they all wanted to take the Druids out? I don't know. But there's something else behind this, that there's some other politics going on. And remember, Rome was electoral, right? It was like a senate. So they didn't actually have kings. They voted for who was in charge. But apparently in Britain and in Gaul, they did actually have proper actual kings, and the lineages and kings. Although the Druids were kind of meant to do the religious, order as well. But, so did Rome. I actually think that there's a lot of the whole thing with when they converted to Christianity and brought this whole Christ thing over with Jesus, and the fact that they sold it to everyone that, he didn't actually have a father, so he's got no lineage, no kind of umbilical cord to his ancestors, because he didn't have a identifiable father who was a man, and this was something to worship, and then the crown on the head, with the thorns and so forth. It's very off-putting and menacing to kings, isn't it? Oh, here's someone who thought they were a king. Look, see what we did to this guy who thought they were a king. He thought he was the king of the Jews. We're all voting down in Rome. We vote for who's in charge. Although I think there was some electoral process in place, how they did it, but also there was the family lineage as well. I think there was some voting going on. I think they voted for the laws, or they voted for the councils and so forth. There was some element of voting in it, and some certain political rights, how they did it, because they had the Druids as the judges. But they did have kings though, didn't they? And a lot of different kings are effectively rulers of many different rulers for different areas, which you didn't have that in the Republic. So Caesar is, being a strategist and a military guy, but also being highly political, and they wanted to bring everything into the Roman Empire and get it under control. You're taking on all these kings who each one of them thinks they're in charge or the boss, and their ancestry is on the line. So the thing with the Jesus thing, and the whole fact that it's a symbol of this is a criminal, this is someone who breaks the law or even breaks the Roman law, until Constantine, ends it. But that's when I don't think the symbol's properly adopted. I don't think the symbol was really taken on the head of the ship, I don't think that symbol was really taken on until Constantine, and then he put an end to or banning crucifixion, because if crucifixion was just, you know, a Roman judicial thing, it's not particularly a spearhead of a religious symbol, is it? It's just, you know, this is, you know, it's generally crime and punishment for anyone who will break the law. So it's off-putting for just generally criminals or generally crime or possibly even rebellious kings. But it's definitely, you know, when they banned it and got rid of it, that's, I think, when it becomes the spearhead of the religion, and then they're sending it out. And in fact, they're wanting to take over all the clans, aren't they? And when you've got these saints going out on the missionary and so forth into Ireland and so forth, they're wanting to discourage people who want to be, you know, all the kings and lineages and rulers, really, aren't they? It's discouraging to internal clan warfare and arguments, but also it all goes back to the Republic, though, because it's a Republic and they don't have kings. They vote for their rulers. So, you know, it really, if you think of it, actually now, looking at it, it could be the conquest of kings, in a way. I mean, you think it could be the populist voting conquest of all these separate kings and rulers. And in order to do that, maybe they needed an emperor to do it. I don't know, but why sacrifice your own republic and create someone who's worse or badder, more badass than all the other kings in order to do it and have them like a Caesar, you know? Unless there was some other figures behind the scenes, you know, the religious leaders pulling all the strings. But, you know, maybe it was the Roman democratic system and their strategic religious heads against all of the kings of the Gauls. I don't know, but there's a lot more to it, and also, you know, when Jesus was alive and active, according to the Bible, you know, he didn't have anything to do with the cross. You know, he's got you know, if he's pottering around doing his own religion, you know, and so forth. Well, they did claim he was king of the Jews, but so what? His religion, whatever it was, he didn't design a logo and say, all right, we'll have, like, you know, this cross thing. It wasn't anything. It was not the franchise. It wasn't the franchise with which we are presented with today. It wasn't the franchise which we're presented with today. That's for sure. And it got presented as that franchise. At some point, became that franchise, you know, and I looking at the Bible, it can be read so there aren't necessarily any unexplainable or supernatural events in it, particularly like in the virgin birth, because it just means that she hadn't yet had a child and they weren't yet married because they were poor, right? I mean, when we get onto the resurrection and things like that, then, you know, maybe that's a little bit more questionable to explain. But also, you know, if this map's not been done right, how do you know that they haven't done a little bit of a mixing things around in there? When it comes to visions and angels and all stuff like that, it would be peculiar and odd if they didn't have some supernatural things, because, like I said in the other video, what religion doesn't? It's not if it doesn't have visions and dreams and entities visiting, it's not a religion, is it? Because that's what they are, and that's the point in them. Like, you know, South America, Australian, dreaming, Siberia, whether it's Hindu or whatever, or the Persians with their jinn or whatever. If you ain't got dreams and visions and entities, you ain't got a religion. It isn't a religion or a spirituality. So the fact that they're saying, all right, you know, this Christianity is a religion, well, it's got to have angels in it at some point, or it isn't a religion. It would be odd. There would be something wrong with it. This is the thing with Dawkins. If he didn't have some kind of beings, right, whether they're Jinn, Ganesh, Shiva, or Siberian, you know, shaman dreams, or Valhalla or whatever, or even in South America, you know, snakes and, you know, Icaros, you ain't got anything. That would be the odd thing out. It would be. That would be the thing that would be peculiar if it didn't have visitations from angels in it or supernatural beings, right? So, this is the thing. But whatever, no matter what Jesus was knocking around doing, and his, adaptations of the Jewish religion, and then what it all amounted to in the end, with his disciples following it on, and it was, we're talking 2, 3. That's then all knocking around for another 300 years until Constantine or whatever. So at least and at that point, that symbol is just, bog standard. Well, not bog standard, but it's standard law and order, judicial function. But it becomes the religion. Law and order and judicial function becomes the religion. It's almost kind of like Roman law, the law of Rome, isn't it? You got all these, when we speak now, lex talionis, or all these different Roman law terms. We've got all these in law now. All the terminology for the Roman wording for the law is the Roman legal system, which is what Jesus literally wouldn't exist if it wanted for that. It's almost kind of like, the Roman law is older than Jesus, really. It's older than Christianity is Roman law, isn't it, really? And how that becomes, Roman law really has become the new religion, which is protruding into the country, rather, really, more so than the actual conquest itself, which kind of fades out and backs down. But that continues, particularly when you're coming into Scotland and Ireland. So it definitely there's definitely rebranding going on. There's a major rebranding going on. Major rebranding. In fact, criminal justice is at the spearhead of it. In fact, criminal justice is the flagship brand more than really the Book of Genesis, or creation, or the angels' visitations by the angels. The law and order is the brand. The law and order aspect of it is the brand, because the Bible, even the Old Testament of the Bible, and even the teachings of Jesus are not actually, well, he's got Jesus on the cross, but he through judicial process, and he can't really do. He himself can't do much. It's not a statue of him, giving someone a bunch of flowers, is it? And they haven't even got him breaking. It's not a picture of. They're not. They haven't stuck him on the front of the on the front of the boat, holding fish out. Chicken. They're not exactly sailing around the islands throwing fish out to everyone, are they? You have some free fish. It could have been a fish and chip shop religion where they give people free fish. Could have ended up being a religion where everyone volunteers to go fishing, and then they just turn up on the beach and throw free fish out to everyone, and then disappear into the fog again. And on the front of the ship is a big carving of Jesus holding out fish, and it's like the free fish religion. It could have been that. But it wasn't. Instead, it's a moniker of him dead or dying after some judicial punishment's been issued. The man who claimed that he was king seems to be what all these Irish and English guys are doing, knocking around when the Romans try to take over, or even the Norman conquest. In fact, it couldn't have been more fitting for William the Conqueror, because particularly when he's trying to take over the place. But then I think they were long gone then at that point. It was just the Anglo-Saxon earls and barons who were resisting. Pretty much the kings had been and gone, fizzled out, and then being absorbed into Alfred and Ethelstein and whatever, into when you get the Confessor, and then Godwinson. So it definitely, now when you think about it, there's definitely some kind of there's definitely some elements of a political conquest tool going on in there, which I hadn't really thought of it before like that. But I'm not knocking the actual book itself or the stories in there, because I actually think that they're actually, the truth of the fact is it's that they're more likely that they did happen and that they are real and that, you know, that person did exist, and that it's not so odd and peculiar and mysterious. And it was just like, you know, Joseph and Mary and Joseph were poor, so they couldn't get married properly or afford a ceremony. And, you know, she hadn't yet had a child. That's why she was a virgin until Jesus was born. But clearly Joseph was his dad, his father. Now, if at some point they wanted to say, you know, use that story and turn it into something else, to a different franchise, which benefited, you know, the Romans in some way, then that is a possibility, but only in the same way that this map's been kind of twisted and changed and altered a little bit. You know, it's not quite true, but they definitely had the skills to draw it extremely accurate, because we know that from their skills that Howard said, you know, and shown, demonstrated were exceptionally accurate alignments over very, very, very long distances, to a very high precision and longitude and latitude. So, in my opinion, this is a political map it's almost like a leaflet or pamphlet to hand out to the troops, to say, look, we can do this, we can take over this place and so forth, you know. Now, I don't know where the true boundary or border was, because we can't, this is good evidence that we can't really trust them on anything they say exactly, right? But it has to, that there's some truth about it, or else they wouldn't even be able to refer to any places. They'd have to just completely and totally fabricate the whole thing. They've got to have some reference points that are real, because you've got to have something to talk about. You know, there's got to be a place where, you know, you need to invade, and it's got to have a name, and you don't want it to have the name that it's, you know, so you don't want to confuse people too much, or else they won't know what you're talking about. You can't confuse people too much, because then they won't even know what you're saying. So it has to be based on, or if not loosely based on, reality and the real places, but he doesn't want it to be exactly how they are, because then people might not go along with it. And I think that's a little bit like Lord of the Rings, you know, because, you know, Tolkien does base his things loosely on or around. Tolkien bases it around Cumbria, and, you know, and he bases it, you know, loosely around, you know, the languages and so forth, but a lot of it's fantasy. In a way, really, you could say that, you know, this is like a little bit like Lord of the Rings, but a lot more, less fantasy and more reality, mainly reality with, like, you know, a little dab of fantasy, rather than Tolkien's is all fantasy with just a little bit of reality, you know. It's like the opposite. It's almost like the mirror of Tolkien. Tolkien was all fantasy with a little bit of reality based on it, right? It was like accurately based on certain places or loosely based around them, where this is quite solidly based around real places, but it has got a good dab of fantasy in there, just to make it more believable, so that people will go along with it, if you know what I mean. So, I mean, but it's an interesting map. I've never seen it before.